Hi, everybody. Welcome to our session this afternoon on the future of innovation and sustainability in sports broadcasting. I'm Melissa Andersen. I'm the Senior Director of Operations at IMG Studios, and I am joined today by some incredibly passionate and experienced colleagues. Sarita Neto, who is the Head of Production for Premier League Productions, Pete Walker, who is our executive producer on EFL and other many and varied football properties, and Paul Williams, who is production executive on European Tour Productions, which is our golf production. So some of you may know about IMG. We are an international production company, quite a big company, and we're really privileged to work on all sorts of productions, from everything from studio shows to magazine-style shows, live outside broadcasts, remote production, social content. We pretty much touch every sport in every form in some way or another. So when we think about the future of sport, sustainability always comes up. So Sarita, I know, as well as being the head of production on PLP, you're also the chair of IMG's Green to Screen steering committee. So what sort of work is IMG doing in that space around sustainability, and particularly with that committee in place?
Yeah, it's hi everybody. It's great to be here. Yeah, we've about 4 or 5 years ago we started a group within the company because we didn't have a sustainability manager or somebody dedicated to look after sustainability, and there, we were talking to people that we deal with regularly, Sky, BBC, TNT, or the ex sort of BT Sport, and we all work together, and we realized that there's something that we could really collectively do as a group of people, all very often working, rocking up at the same events, covering the same games. We work quite closely with BT and with Sky and with BBC on Premier League particularly, and we realized that there's something that we needed to do. Now, what the collective thing that is important and why we do this is because sport will be incredibly impacted by climate change. And I don't think it's any secret because we all watch sport, and we see when football grounds are flooded, when some of the games can't happen. We see it during the tennis, in the US sometimes, and in Australia particularly. Golf also is impacted heavily. So for us as a company, it became really, really important that we look how we can play our part with sport, and because it's our business, it's our bread and butter, and we wanted to make a difference. And in doing that, we looked at various things in how we can actually drive our carbon reductions down, not just our carbon reductions down or emissions down, but also what we can do to innovate and actually at scale make changes within the company, which will then affect sport more broadly.
Brilliant. And what sort of initiatives is happening within IMG itself?
We've got a steering group, and that steering group, and we were quite focused on how we divvy up that steering group. We sort of set it up because IMG is a very varied company in terms of the sports we represent. We represent golf, as I said, football, a big part of what we do, but we also do tennis, we do EuroLeague basketball. So there's many, many different sports that we do. And we have a huge number of people working for us. And we decided that the best way that we should do it was to have a dedicated strategy on how we can affect change. And it sort of looked at all the areas of what we do, our productions itself, and we've got a leader set up for that, leading that area. We've got somebody looking at our editorial, so they set up a working group to look at what can we do, because our messaging is important and the stories we tell is important. And then we look at our facilities ourselves, our tech, our facilities, whether it is in the building itself or whether it's on site or when we go and do physical events. So we've put together a steering group with people leading each of those areas and then meeting regularly and then sort of like pulling data in and looking at how we can drive down our reductions.
And obviously, there's been some real successes already in that space. So, Paul, for example,
So I come from the world of golf, which may excite you, may not excite you. But we have the biggest challenges in golf because we travel around the world 52 weeks of the year, delivering around 20 hours of golf a week, traveling 70 people from the UK mainly to cover the golf for all our clients, which same as Sarita said for Sky. 200 countries take our golf. UK is sort of Sky Sports. And the big challenge around that is the fact that our carbon footprint is huge because we're flying that amount of people all around the world. So we looked at it and went, we need to do something about that. We need to reduce our carbon footprint. How do we do that? To be quite frank, we've got into the world of remote production, which we'll talk about in a second. But I wanted to kind of make an impact and do something that really was impactful, not just talk about it. So we looked at how domestically in the UK, we could maybe deliver something with zero emissions. So from going from up there to how could we bring those emissions down by when we do have to fly people, how could we do that? So we looked at fuel, our fuel usage was high. So I sort of went, okay, we control all our power usage, how we do that. We've got a lot of people, the companies that we work with, we talked to them about it. And in the end, we came to a solution which was hydrogen, which is an exciting bit of technology, actually. It really is, because the reason we went to hydrogen was because it's a very robust solution. So for when you're doing sport, you need robustness, you need redundancy so that you don't fall off air. Hydrogen offered that. Hydrogen also offered zero emissions by using fuel cell technology, which was really crucial. And the only byproduct of using hydrogen is water. So you get no exhaust fumes, none of that horrible stuff from diesel. And the sort of plan was actually this work. So we tried it at a big event. We went really big. We decided we want to make an impact. So we went massive on the biggest golf event that our client did in the UK, which was called the BMW PGA Championship at Wentworth. It was a massive event, quite high risk, because when you try new technology, if it falls down, they never forgive you. But ultimately, for us, we really believed in it. It worked, it delivered. And so over the past year, we've delivered 4 projects with hydrogen power, saving around about 50 tons of emissions, which is brilliant. It's been a real success story. But hydrogen comes with its pros and cons. It's not the total solution for everything. It's very much kind of, it's a great bit, as I say, a great bit of tech, but you need a big amount of space. You need a bit more money. You need to get you need to get people behind it. But what it is it delivers zero emissions. It's, we need to eliminate fossil fuels from outside broadcasts much more. There's battery solutions coming along the line, but hydrogen was a big ambition. And we've grown on that ambition. We haven't kind of reined back. We haven't just done it once. We wanted to make sure that everybody didn't see it as a one-stop sort of thing. So yeah, it's been great.
And you've won awards for it?
We did. We won a broadcast award for Sustainability Projects of the Year, which was really amazing because it shows you that if you put all the hard work in and people understand what you're trying to achieve by eliminating emissions from sports production, which is really difficult when you're traveling around the world. That's very difficult. So if we can do that in the UK to help offset some of that traveling, it's great. We got recognised for that, so it was nice.
Yeah, really nice. Yeah. I was lucky enough to drink the water. That was the byproduct. But one thing I noticed is that it takes up a massive amount of space. Obviously, it creates a much cleaner environment. There's all the pros, but what are the other options then if you can't do hydrogen?
So hydrogen is, as you say, big fuel, big footprint. It is the most. One thing that's important to know about hydrogen is it is a definite zero emissions. There's no kind of that fuel cell technology delivers. There are no combustion engines driving, there's no oil, no moving parts. It delivers zero emissions. But the other options that you can do is golf is difficult, but if you're in football stadiums or you're in other places, you can plug into the grid. So you lose local power. You plug off that wall, for instance, straight into a battery, into a UPS, straight into your outside broadcast. As long as that power originally comes from a green source, which is where does this building get their energy from? That can be zero emissions.
And actually, on that note, working with Premier League, that there are some clubs that are really actually doing amazing work in that on that particularly. Arsenal is one of the clubs that has a battery already, and we're not exactly there yet where the broadcasters actually feel totally confident just to go on the battery, but I think we'll get there fairly soon. And, as soon as you sort of get one club that goes there and has the full solution, you'll get more clubs that actually do it as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because power can be quite a dull subject, you'd think, but actually, once you start talking about hydrogen, batteries, UPS, moving away from fossil fuels, people get really excited by it. But the biggest challenge in our industry is the fact that you've got to have total redundancy, which means that you can't rely on, say, the plug socket delivering you power. You need to be able to back that up in case of, there's a power failure, and we can never afford to fall off air in sport. It's...
But it's also a really tangible thing, isn't it? Because there was a period, I remember, when everyone was doing carbon offsetting, and there was Sarita's face. So we're moving away from that because there's comments like that's just greenwashing and, all the rest of it. So it is really important now, isn't it, to find those actual tangible changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You're looking for, and that's another thing, which you look for ways that you can have genuine carbon reduction initiatives within your productions. One aspect of that would be that the money that you would have used for offsetting, you look at the lighting that you have across, if we have 240 people working for us on Premier League productions, and currently the lighting is not LED lighting. And you use the money that you've actually would have used for carbon offsetting, and you say, okay, fine, let's just replace all the lights with LED lighting. And that actually brings the electricity consumption down. So you reduce, that is a genuine reduction. And then you also look at throwing money at new technology, new initiatives, because those are the things that genuinely reduce your carbon footprint.
Yeah, and that's a clever use of money, rather than pay it into some sort of, kind of, whether it's planting trees or projects. I think reinvesting it into future tech will have more of an instant impact into our industry. So I think it's really important that we kind of continue to do that, because that's what help pays for, future technology is never, it can take a bit of investment. So,
And Pete, I find people talk a lot about remote production at the moment, and almost as the future. But actually, you've been doing remote production for a long time.
Yeah. So we've hello everyone. So finally a word. So we've been. I look after. I hear it spoken about as the largest remote production in world football, which I think we sort of had challenged recently from production somewhere in Eastern Europe, but I think we still can lay claim to be the largest. We do 1,698 games a season, fully produced remotely from Stockley Park, which is where IMG's headquarters are. And so we've been doing that for sort of 5 years. Previously, this is the 6th year of that production. We've scaled up this year, but it's all... And when we talk about remote production, I suppose it's worth just kind of clarifying what that actually means. And I suppose being truly remote is very difficult. Clearly, you've got a football match happening somewhere. You need an element of your production at the stadium to film whatever's happening on the pitch. So we're remote in a way that the only footprint we have at the stadium is our 4 or 6 camera operators, depending what our camera spec is. Sometimes you'll see remote production as being sort of advertised, but actually, in actual fact, it might be a smaller OB facility on site, still with riggers and camera operators and all of the technicians that need to go in there. But as I said, in our production, we are literally just full cameras on site. We've put in installation at the stadium so that they're permanently cabled. Our camera operators go in and we bring back those camera signals into Stockley Park. And on a Saturday, we'll have 34 games in the EFL, 120 cameras coming into the building, and all of our facility, our galleries, our directors, our replay operators, the editing, the highlights, the commentary, it's all done from our remote hub. And so I think there's probably over 200 people at Stockley Park on a Saturday working on EFL productions, and there's big benefits to it as well. I think that you mentioned the cost. Cost can obviously be a factor on a production like that when you've got so many games happening concurrently and at scale and across the season. When there's thousands of games, then a remote production actually help bring down those costs. And so, as much as we want to be seen as sustainable heroes, actually there's a cost benefit to the federation as well, and that helps kind of push that forward. The technology, obviously, you mentioned the technology. Now we've got these effectively sort of galleries in a box that allows us to produce at scale in that way. I suppose the developments in those over the last sort of 5 or 10 years has made that remote production so much more achievable, I guess.
But it also allows you to have consistency across the editorial and also local crews, right? So, because it's all over the country.
Yeah, exactly. So, EFL, obviously, it's the English Football League, and it's spread far and wide across the country. And one of the commitments that we made was to try and ensure, again, our sustainability was as I suppose, as sustainable as it could be by having local camera operators. So we tend to travel crews of sort of 4 to 6 camera operators all within a sort of 20-mile radius of the stadiums where we can. Obviously, that's a big logistical project, but in the main, that tends to work. Similarly, we've just started looking this season where we're providing more commentaries for Sky Sports to put our commentators to also be localised as well. So, a big project went in to try and find the locations of all of our talent and ensure that we were giving them games in their closest stadiums as well. And that's been quite good to see.
And Paul, you also do an element of remote production, obviously slightly differently, but how do you decide between what's going to be a remote production and what needs to be sort of a traditional outside broadcast?
So there's 2 types of remote for golf. In golf terms, because obviously there's 2 types. There's a kind of standard remote, which, as I say, we had about 70 people would go to a normal full 14 camera outside broadcast abroad. A sort of standard remote would bring all that production back to Stockley Park and to our headquarters, and where producers, directors, graphics, sort of scoring and all the rest of it would all be back in London. And the main we'd also have a backup director on site in case anything went wrong. But we'd have maybe about 40 people would travel. And that would bring us a kind of fairly robust coverage, because we still have 14 line cameras with satellite. So we'd look at that and kind of go, that's where the client would want that, the tours, whoever they are, or the RNA, or whatever sort of client we're working with. But then we might go a step further. We were talking about making savings. There's another way, live view, a thing called live view, which relies on 4G and 5G. It's quite out there because in the sense that you're removing all satellite, you're going to a golf course, which we would pre-test. We'd already send people out there to test for 4G and 5G signals. And then basically, if that golf course passes the test and we go, right, every hole, we can pick up a 5G or 4G mast and we can get pictures, that's going to work. Mm-hmm. And therefore, that eliminates, from that 70 people, we're now down to only having to have 30 people. Because all we have is 14 cameramen, all with backpacks, and they have about 8 SIM cards in their back. And those pictures jump around the SIM cards to get the strongest signal back to that mast, and that mast goes down the line. And it's quite scary when you think about it, that you're broadcasting live on Sky Sports with using mobile technology. But it's a solution that if you think, obviously you don't go in massive, you wouldn't go with a massively big thing and go, this is the Open Championship.
Do the Open
You wouldn't do anything like that. But you pick off the smaller events to get people's trust in it. Once people trust the technology, then you're on the journey. It's getting them to trust it. And we did our first thing in Thailand. And also the other thing is you can't do it where there's a lot of crowds for obvious reasons, because the 4G, 5G technology will be interfered with too much. So you have to pick your kind of places very carefully.
Pick your battles.
Yeah, so
Absolutely, pick your battles.
Pick your battles.
But it delivers big savings, both sustainability-wise and financially.
yeah, and you mentioned getting people to trust the technology, and that bonded cellular, 5G, 4G, the live view solutions is becoming so much more prevalent now.
Yeah.
We will supply live view technology for Sky to do their pre-match interviews around all the grounds. Our ITV highlight show, that's purely produced on live view. You're right, when they're at Ellen Road and there's 60,000 fans, you find dead spots throughout the day. So 5 minutes before kickoff, you'll often find everyone is on their phone, they're checking the team news or they're texting home, whatever they're doing. Once that the game's kicked off, you find that signal tends to stabilise quite a lot, and so we're starting to learn more and more as well. We're investigating how Starlink might start to be a bit more robust, I suppose, around that as well, adding an element of robustness. And there's lots of sort of, I suppose, proofs of concept now of productions that are actually being done on bonded cellular. And as you say, then there's no Jenny on site, a far smaller footprint on site. And it's a really interesting sort of space. It's happening.
I suppose at the end of the day as well, it's it's a balance between, you got to work for a company that and a client, because it's always a dual relationship here. So you've got to have the client who's prepared to walk that journey with you as well. And we work with really good federations in terms of European Tour. And I know the RNA is very hot on their sustainability as well. We do work for UEFA. UEFA is great. Premier League themselves as well. I mean, they started their journey quite later than some others. But also, if the client is happy with taking an element of risk, then you can actually trial these sort of innovations at a lower scale, and then once POCs are done, you can actually scale them up. So it's a balance between a client that's prepared to take that risk, and then us actually trailblazing, and sometimes as well, and sometimes they just go, no.
Oh. But it's constantly a balancing act, isn't it? Because also I'm thinking about Albert certification, which I'm sure most people have seen at the end of programs, particularly with the broadcasters in the UK. Almost all programs now need to be Albert certified. Mm-hmm. And I know, Paul, you were talking earlier about sending crews to Scotland, for example. You can't use flights. Yeah, so Albert certification, just a very quick thing, is it's a kind of, well, we as kind of making programs, you need to have your programs. They call it Albert certified, or it's a tool to capture your carbon footprint. Is what it originally was designed for, and now it's for broadcast. And now it's a kind of tool that can get your program to a level where it's called certification, which means that your program has passed a number of tests to make it sustainable, as called a sustainable production. And for us in golf, it's quite difficult because obviously we're kind of, going all over the world, and it's kind of, and actually that's not the hardest part, because they'll look at it and go, well, actually you need to fly to India, you need to fly to China. We know you can't drive there. We know you can't get the train. But if you want to go to Scotland, that's where our problems come. Mm-hmm. Because they don't, as part of that certification, there's rules in place. And those rules are, if you want to go from London to Edinburgh, you've got to get a train. You've got to get the train, or drive or share a car or whatever. Okay? Mm-hmm. Or you can go by boat. But you definitely can't go by plane. So what we do is, we look at that, we talk to, it's run by BAFTA, Albert, and we talk to them and we say, look, okay, we need to fly 300 people or potentially 200 people from London. That's not kind of true, but just for one journey for this kind of example, London to Edinburgh, a number of people,
how many emissions is that? And the reason we have to do it is because of schedules, and there's freelancers coming from all over, mostly cameramen. We might be having 70, 80 cameramen. So this is a big event. And what we'll do is we look at doing the projects like hydrogen and other zero emissions, ideas to offset those emissions that we're causing by flying X amount of people. So it's a kind of trade-off. It's like saying, okay, we're going to need to fly those 40 people, but to fly those 40 people from London to Edinburgh, we're going to give you 3 or 4 zero emission productions. And it shows that your intent to deal with what you're doing as a business.
Because there's obviously a financial impact as well, right?
Absolutely.
So
because
constantly finding that balance.
By doing the trains and things like that, it's all very well, but most of the time you're travelling a day earlier because of...
Exactly.
There's a massive cost implication in that sense. So...
Trains aren't always running that well in this country, I have to be honest.
That's a whole different problem.
Absolutely.
Especially on weekends.
Sarita, how are you dealing with that balance? You're obviously also sending crews around the country and more widely.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably less of a problem for us on Premier League because obviously we don't travel abroad that much. We've got a couple of shows that actually did used to travel quite a lot, but it's local crews. We've sort of cajoled and bullied and eventually convinced some of the editorial teams that actually there's good enough local crews in other countries. You don't always, and it takes the fun out of it sometimes. I have to be honest, because you want to work in telly because you're going all over the world, isn't it? I mean, that's part of it's part of the fun. So it's So we do use local crews. So if we're filming in Australia, we'll use local crews in Australia, and the technology is good enough that we can get that material back fairly quickly to be able to edit in time for weekly shows. Locally, though, it's all sorts of initiatives in terms of pooling cars, but. I mean, our biggest impact is actually not ourselves. It's freelancers. It's because you're booking freelancers to travel. So it's about just, spreading the message and actually getting people really thinking about where people are traveling from to go to games. And it's an awareness because I remember 4 years ago, nobody used to think about it. You just book people.
That's true.
You just go, okay, well, he's good. Now you do challenge. You find that some of the production, so some of the productions are starting to challenge each other and going, well, why can't you get somebody that is local? So but it's working with our OB providers as well, because, I mean, we don't book our freelance crew that goes on OBs. Our OB companies book them. So there is quite a lot of collaboration between our suppliers, which often is the OB companies, the outside broadcast companies, and then clients as well, because clients ask us to do things and we're sort of like we have conversations with our suppliers as well.
Mm-hmm. But also I've noticed in business development and looking at new business, responding to RFPs and things like that, there's a real, it's not even a desire anymore, it's a necessity to be considering this at every single moment.
A few years ago, 5 years ago, it was a couple of green warriors that were in a business. Now you've got to get senior leadership, absolute their buy-in in a company. And we have that because there's regulatory requirements. I know we're not part of Europe anymore, but we actually do. There's some bodies that we have to report to in Europe. We operate in Europe. We do loads of events in Europe. So there's a lot of government regulatory stuff coming down the line, but we also do it because we want to. And, and clients, you almost cannot get the business unless you prove that you are thinking about how you behave in the environment. And it's important to us.
Absolutely. Pete, what kind of new technologies then are we looking at? Because I know you've got loads of different things on the go at the moment.
Yeah, well, I sort of mentioned the live views, the Starlink technology. Obviously, that way of transporting content back, I suppose, to the hub is probably the way things are developing a bit more. They're not so new, I would say, but they're definitely getting better. Obviously, we use use technology called Simply Live, which is effectively a remote gallery solution. And I've seen, obviously, we use it at scale for the football. We have a really big facility at Stockley Park, but actually, interestingly, over the last few months, I'm seeing more productions come into that facility as well. I'm looking to do remote productions again that way. Obviously, there's the reason that Simply Live is really interesting as a piece of technology, so it's able to scale up quite easily. We can have 34 concurrent games. It's obviously good price-wise, so for federations or productions, it can be a really useful piece of equipment. And we're seeing more remote productions. I suppose we saw EuroLeague basketball produce a sort of pre-game from on-site, all via live view in Simply Live last week. I think I saw the second version that they've done of that, a big game out in Belgrade, I believe.
Yes.
But yeah, in terms of new technology, I think that's probably like those things developing, and yeah, I'm sure more and more things will
robotics.
Yeah, well, interesting. The PTZ cameras,
press conferences that are done.
Yeah, so this season in the championship, we went from 4 cameras to 6 cameras, and 2 of those are remotely installed 18-yard cameras in effect, and we can control those from Stockley Park, even if your 18-yard cameras are at Sunderland. We'll have an operator literally changing the angle of that camera on the game. There's some really cool kind of remote technology we're using that can pre-program those positions as well. And so a director can call for 10 or so camera positions on each camera, and literally at the push of a button that can operate. So there's some interesting stuff happening there. We're currently looking at the ways that we colorize our cameras. So there's a term called racking, I guess, when you're in an OB, and that can be tricky remotely. So there's a lot of development at the minute. We're doing a lot of hard work to figure out how we can improve the way that we colour match our cameras across a multi-camera production. Lots of AI audio stuff. We were doing we had sort of surrounding pitch mics at Ipswich, which were coming in on a piece of kit called Salsa, which was auto mixing the football match effects. So yeah, lots and lots of cool kit that's fun.
And all of those things obviously create so many different ways of working, especially for the younger generation coming into the market now, because a couple of years ago you needed one particular skill to be able to work a camera. Now and we're also getting. You almost need to be multi-skilled now to be able to work in the television industry. If you can work a computer, you're pretty much made. It's different. It's totally different what it looks like now working the tech.
Definitely.
What it did a few years ago.
Interesting that so the EFL productions, as I mentioned, so many games are happening in such concurrency that we've seen a real. I suppose just a real kind of need to find people that can operate the technology, and we've got some really interesting roles for new industry entrants who are coming in, and I suppose I'm long enough in the tooth to know that my first job was making cups of tea for people in edits, but now people are coming in and are operating on our games straight away. They're sort of thrown into the live environment from the off with training, obviously, and a bit of hand holding, but. And it's that technology that's allowing you to do it. I suppose you're right, like the younger generation, which I feel I should still be part of, but maybe I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
They're just much more savvy that they're able to operate stuff in a way that you had to have more training back in. Yeah. So
and actually,
really
the younger generation actually are bringing us most of our best ideas and innovations, and actually because they just think differently about things, and that's what you need. You need in businesses like ours, you need that younger generation coming in with more energy, fresh energy, fresh perspectives, and thinking outside the box and challenging us. And going, well, why are you doing it like this? Have you thought about doing it like this? That's the sort of people we're looking for in our
golf whole sustainability thing. Of course, Albert, you talk about Albert. We had to reinvent because we did a whole year of 52 weeks of the year of golf to try and do every production every week. But that was our whole way of working was one big certification, one big piece of work the whole season. And that was designed by one of our young runner, actually, who came up with it and went, why don't we do this? And I was like, brilliant. And I took it to BAFTA. We talked to Sky Sports, kind of, and that was it. So, yeah.
It's the future generation. That's where the answers are going to come from. Definitely.
Fantastic. So how does all of this that we've talked about, sustainability, remote production, how does this play out on screen? What are the stories we're telling? How does it weave into the editorial?
In our industry, it is almost the biggest single impact we can have. I work for the Premier League, and we go out to more than 190 countries all over the world. So our reach is massive. Your reach is massive in terms of European tour and everywhere. So the biggest thing that we can do is actually create the awareness and actually tell the stories. But the difficulty with that is that you're not going to just slap something about sustainability in the middle of a Premier League match where Arsenal v Man City, are you? It doesn't make any sense. Right. So it's about finding the times when you can actually do it. So it needs to have context in editorially. A good example of that would be if EFL games are sort of like waterlogged, if there's too much rain, then you can get your commentators.
Yeah, so I mean, we were talking about this earlier, and I think there are definite some kind of standout moments or features that can be a big piece of content that I suppose can highlight the sustainability impacts or even sustainability kind of models that are happening around the leagues. But equally, that message can't just be rammed down people's throats with boring, I suppose, editorial kind of features that are just jammed into programming. And so it's thinking about how you bring that into the everyday broadcast, and it might be the way that your talent, your commentators, or your front of screen talent talk about some of the things that we're seeing, those changes in weather patterns, and some of the impacts that's having. And I mentioned at the start of this season, we saw Wimbledon's football pitch flooded out. Actually, their pitch collapsed. They ended up having to play away from their home ground for a couple of weeks. And equally, like, we're starting to see, lots more games go off in the EFL with the sort of changing weather patterns, and we're seeing technologies come into the football industry as well, for pitch protection systems. We see these big balloons that get kind of put out across the football stadiums, and we weave some of those pictures into our, the openers and bits and pieces, and the commentators are talking about the fact that pitch protection system has allowed the game to go ahead today, and it's not a big moment. We're not really, we're not staying on it too long, but it's forming parts of the narrative, and I think that's just, it's probably the way.
And every so occasionally, I mean, we've got an opportunity coming up now soon about Green Football Weekend, where it almost runs similar to No Room for Racism. So there's a definite campaign that happens over a specific weekend, and you've got a lot of football clubs, Sky, TNT, ourselves, we all get involved, and we really do. So we then make features, and we really go out across that weekend, across all the channels, and purposely talk about it. So there's marquee moments sometimes, and we all work together on those as well. But you can't just bang it in there every time, but we do what we can when the opportunity presents itself.
I mean, in golf they've kind of been quite clever, because we engaged some of the players around hygiene particularly, and we got them trained at water and all that, and they loved all that, and they thought, wow, this is amazing. But also the tour themselves have gone on a step further, and they've they use apps. The players all have apps with their carbon footprint on it. So when they're booking their travel, it's now gone from never thinking about that to now the first thing they see is their carbon footprint on their app, because they use the same systems, all the players, to book their travel and their transport. So they look at these apps and they go, oh wow, I'm doing,
oh wow,
ouch. And actually for them it's kind of quite a conscious thing. So that's amazing. They've gone from that to players every day going on their app, going, booking my flight, oh, can I do this? And not, it's interesting, changing perception. Of,
You're seeing lots of conversations in the media about the way that football clubs travel to games as well.
Yeah, it's so difficult because they do a lot, but then if they they have to fly, they have to, by the nature of stuff, they have to move around, and people criticize them, and sometimes some of the bigger leagues don't want to do anything because the fear of hypocrisy. But I mean, it's better to do something than nothing at all.
Nothing.
That's the point. You can't suddenly say, well, if you are one of the big clubs, well, why are your guys traveling or anything? Well, at least there's loads of stuff that they are doing that are really good. So don't criticize just because of the one visible thing. And people always seem to think flying is the be all and of everything. Flying's footprint is actually really low in the world. It's not really that massive. There's other things which are much higher than actually flights.
Of course, and all sports have their challenges, right? I know even Formula One in particular, but a lot of those Formula One drivers are really passionate about it as well, and finding ways of reducing their footprint.
And you need ambassadors as well. That's the thing. I mean, you need big names to be ambassadors and stand up there and go, I believe in this, getting on their socials, and actually really being a spokesperson for it as well, because that's what makes a difference.
But they're kind of realising the reputation is really good for them to do that. Companies particularly, IMG are really good at pushing to show that they are forward thinking. And a lot of individual sports people, that, particularly in golf, they realise that it's actually important to them, to what how they're perceived.
Absolutely. So we're going to open up to the floor now. Questions? Yeah. There's a microphone on its way to you.
This is actually for all of you, because it's very fascinating, because I'm fascinated by the cost and the carbon footprint. So I'm just curious, because one of the things we hear about are the sponsorships and contracts that are deal for broadcasting and stuff like that. I'm just curious to know in terms of for the English Football League, because obviously the bigger clubs in the Premier League will have these, if you look at the Manchester Cities and the thing you mentioned in your chat about Arsenal being one of the first clubs, is there some kind of proviso built in these contracts that sort of makes allowances for cost for, to allow the sponsorship to create sort of a cost, like a price for the carbon footprint? So for example, a certain amount of money set aside so that technology can be developed to improve it, because I think that's a really good thing, because often, we think about the so-called greed of the industry. I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that, and what's the plan for the next few years for this?
Yeah, interesting. I suppose I think when you're looking at a football club and its commercial deals, it's completely separate from a broadcast deal, which tends to be struck with the federation. And I think we mentioned it earlier. Mel and I often see when you're looking at new business, they'll often they want to see your sustainable practices. They'll interrogate that a lot, and so lots of federations will not work with companies that don't have them. I don't know how that ties in with the commercial deals at the clubs. I think they're separate entities, but I'd say as federations for sure. I don't know about the Premier League and how that works with them, but when we are like retendering for work, let's say if we've already got a contract with a federation, or when we're looking at new business, there's always a direct ask to examine the sustainable credentials of the broadcast, of the production companies. Let's say so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that much knowledge in terms of the clubs and how the commercial deals and the clubs are structured. And obviously, in the Premier League, it's slightly different. The 20 clubs, actually, they own the Premier League, that they equal shareholders in the Premier League. So the Premier League as an entity belongs to the clubs. So I don't really know how those commercial deals are struck, because we're just contracted by the Premier League working for them.
I mean, it was just purely in terms of maybe that's something that could be looked at and, creating, using a further development of sponsorship, because I think listening to what you're talking about with the camera work, I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I didn't realize watching ITV that, you have these remote things, but it's because, I'm of a generation watching Match of the Day and the old guys, but it's really interesting.
We do, from a production perspective, we put money aside in all of our production budgets that is specifically allocated to using in, and as we talked about earlier, you know, previously that would have gone on carbon offsetting, but now it is much more considered how we use that money. We pool it across the business as well. So it's not just specific to individual productions, and try and get the absolute most out of that. And we don't ever get pushback, do we?
No.
I mean, I've even put it in budgets with internationally with countries that are not renowned for being particularly forward thinking in this space, and everyone's open to it. So, of course.
Hi, my name is Jing. I'm from China. 2 years ago, I applied the production coordinator role in the IMG. I received the second interview, but didn't get the final offer. I want to introduce myself. I worked in film industry for 12 years, 8 years in China as production coordinator, and 4 years producer in UK. My recent project is the Wicked from Universal Studio and the Ink Black Heart from BBC and Warner Brothers Studio. And I like sports very well. I like swimming. I have learned 10 years Chinese dance, 4 years taekwondo, 4 years roller skating, and I'm very environment protected producer. All the locations was very well protected after our shooting, and I'm a very flexible person. I can move my accommodation to the Heathrow, which near your company. So I saw the production coordinator role was posted on your website. So I will come back home to apply the same role again. Please give me the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, put it in. That's good sales pitch.
My mother tongue is Mandarin, and I can speak English very well, and I can speak a little Spanish and Thai language. Thanks.
Good.
Brilliant.
Good.
Sounds really useful. Yeah.
Lovely to meet
Good
you.
sales pitch. I like
There's
it.
another question at the
I was really interested in what you're saying about kind of the changes you're making not affecting the product, and like obviously all of the changes you're making almost kind of being invisible. And you're saying that when it goes wrong, that's flagged up, because you're trying to say things that are almost like go unseen and like make no noticeable difference. I'm just wondering, outside of like the travel that you're talking about, are there any particular areas that you're finding, whether it's because the technology doesn't exist or more things need to be done, that's particularly difficult because sustainability is not allowing you to preserve what you're already producing, whether it would affect the product or anything like that?
Great question.
That's such a good question.
Yeah.
Really good question.
Yeah. To try and answer that, I suppose, kind of comes back around to the client a little bit as well. And so I think we spoke about earlier, like the Football League production is 1,600 games a season, right? And ultimately, it's so sustainable because of its nature, not its nature is sustainable. Like the one thing didn't lead to the other. The remit wasn't make a sustainable production. The remit was make a production that comes in at X cost. And the best way to do that was ultimately very sustainable. Now, if you were doing a single game somewhere for a high profile broadcaster, I suspect that putting in however many camera operators without a robust production solution wouldn't really go down so well. And so I think, to sort of try and answer that question, that there are probably, it takes, we mentioned it earlier, it takes the client to sort of be on board with it. Now, if I was to go in and cover a game for Sky, let's say, I'm sure that they would ensure that there was an OB truck on site, and so the sustainability becomes less and less. I don't know if that...
It's about scale, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got the infrastructure for EFL, which enables you to then plug and play, if you like.
Yeah.
But if you're doing a one-off production, so it's often to do with the size as well. And
and it's all about the connectivity and everything as well, isn't it? So, because if you're going to do a one-off event somewhere, say there's a snooker, what's the darts at Ali Pali or something?
Yes.
Even they've got connectivity. But if it's a one-off event somewhere, there's going to be no, you're going to struggle with having all the lines and all the, connectivity in there to be able to do what EFL is doing, or even what we're doing with the Premier League, because we've just got lines coming out of every club. and then it becomes almost a less sustainable production. It's the one-off. So you can do these sort of innovative things once you have the scale of it.
Mm-hmm. But connectivity is growing really rapidly as well. And I know a company that works as part of IMG, Singularity, they have fiber all over the world, and these things called POPs, where you can just go to this place and plug in, and you've got connectivity back to various places in the world. And as that happens, I think also I'm seeing some events and federations are looking, let's do it there, because actually that provides us with this opportunity to do something more sustainable.
More and more. I mean, you look at the tennis now. I know the ATP is coming in. The ATP, the big tennis events, that's also starting to be more remote, happening from London. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, those guys are sitting there at night and actually doing Indian Wells, and you've got a couple of cameras. There are still some people there, but I mean, the B courts and things are coming into
Formula
London.
One's remote, right?
Yeah,
So,
Formula One,
Formula
Sky.
One's all directed out of South East London.
Mm.
The main cameras are there and everything, but the actual pictures and everything else are cut in the UK.
Yeah. And a lot of the Sky football games, Premier League games, are actually done remote as well. There's still quite a bit of people on, but there's a lot less than would have been a few years ago.
I mean, the big flagship events, the big kind of events that we have in our, sporting calendar in the UK, they'll still want an on-site presence and everybody to be there because they want to feel that and they believe that being there is important. I don't know, but...
Yeah, but it's a really good question.
Yeah. I think we've got time for one more at the back there.
You were just talking about scale in particular playing quite a vital role potentially in the sustainability of productions. And I was just wondering, from a women's sport perspective, does the rapid growth and hopefully continued growth of women's sport offer an opportunity or a challenge in terms of creating sustainable productions, because they are much smaller at the moment in terms of scale? They're played in slightly more niche locations. Sometimes they are played in the bigger stages, but they are sometimes played in much more niche locations that are less connected. Does it offer an opportunity or a challenge, do you think? And if it's a challenge, is that a challenge that the industry is welcoming or is slightly hesitant about?
I'm gonna try and answer that question. I think it depends on the sport a little bit, because again, when you we pitched for the WSL a couple of years ago. I remember doing the WSL tender, and because there were quite a lot of games, you could really build in sustainable solutions into it. But again, it comes back to that, if it's a lesser known sport, smaller federation, then it becomes different. And so it is the scale and the volume of what you're able to work with that you're able to actually do something. And I don't think it changes whether it's women's sport or men's sport. I don't think so, because the broadcasters who are often broadcasting those sports have the same requirements from people like us who make it for them. We're a production company, except for the Premier League, we are a broadcaster. But when we make stuff, we produce it for BBC, Sky, and other broadcasters, and those broadcasters all require from us to do sustainable productions. So,
we delivered last year, first ever women's sport live event to be powered with delivering zero emissions. It was the Women's Open, which is the biggest sort of event in women's golf. We produced that from St Andrews, home of golf, delivered zero emissions. And as you say, Sarita, it's the same. It would have been the same if it had been the men's, but it actually was great. It was the first women's sporting event to deliver zero emissions. That was a big statement for them, for the client, for the RNA. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on the sport.
Yeah,
it definitely does. I mean, I think you kind of touched upon definitely one of the challenges. I think you mentioned some of the events happening at bigger stadiums and some happening at smaller stadiums. I mean, thinking with my football head on WSL, sometimes we'll see them play in the main stadium, let's say. So Arsenal women often play at the Emirates now. If they've got a secondary stadium as well that they play at, then obviously the challenge is a challenge, because if you are going to have dedicated connectivity, you need it to both sites, and depending on which one they play on. So I think the opportunity is there, the challenge comes with it as well.
I would say it's a very welcome challenge. So I certainly know in IMG there's a lot of passion around women's sport. So we're definitely looking at all sorts of things and the opportunity there at the moment, alongside the challenges. Yeah. Well, we have to wrap up there. We've run out of time, but thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the RTS for having us. And if anyone wants any more information, or you've already found our page with jobs, try img.com.
Looking out for that CV already.
Exactly. Thank you so much for coming. It's been lovely.
Hope to see you all. Okay.